Hi, back again for part 3 of our review for Introduction to Worldviews. So let's pick up where we left off, and we were doing the lie and the void and that sort of thing. But let's move on. All right, the fool has said in his heart, "There is no God." From Psalms 14:1 and I believe 53:1 as well. And is that just an insult to atheists? No, it's not. I mean, it's actually a statement of truth that the fool has said in his heart that there is no God. Well, let's talk about this just for a moment. All right, we talked about this idea of the speck in the speck. Let me just check our times to make sure that we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be fine. All right, so these videos can only be about 10 minutes long, I'm finding out. So, all right, I got up this morning and I felt pretty big. All right, yeah, big guy and everything like that, but if you really think about it, me compared to my property, if you backed up big enough to see my whole property, I would be a speck. Well, my property in the town, well, you guessed it, it's a speck. My town in the state, you guessed it again, it's a speck. All right, so far I'm a speck and a speck and a speck and a speck and a speck, okay? All right, so wait a minute. My state, compared to the whole world, it's a speck. Big speck, but still a speck, all right? My planet in the solar system, do you know you can actually lose the Earth in the solar system? It's a speck. All right, wait. Our solar system in the galaxy, you guessed it again, it's a speck. Our galaxy in the known universe, it's a speck if it's that. All right. So anyway, so as a speck and a speck and a speck and a speck and a speck, all right, I do not have a great perspective from which to say what doesn't exist in the whole universe. Now I can say something does exist because I've seen it. All right. I can say this watch exists because I've seen it. There it is. But to say because I don't see a watch and haven't seen a watch, to say no watches exist, that would be a foolish statement, and that's what the Bible is driving at with this statement. That for a person to say, I don't believe in God, different thing. For a person to say, I doubt the existence of God, different thing. All right, but to insist, doggone it, that God does not exist, I think has another reason other than reason. Okay, all right. So moving on, wait, the speck and the speck argument. I forgot about this. What about Hey, you can say the same thing for purple cows. You can use that argument to justify anything. Well, the difference is what? A little thing called universal religiosity that literally the world over, 90+% of people walking believe in God in one way, shape, or form. Nobody believes in purple cows, okay? So to say that you can make the same argument for purple cows or some other absurd notion is just not so. To say that it's unreasonable, irrational to believe in God is to say basically 90% of the population of the planet pretty much throughout all of time was irrational. Don't think so, all right? Okay, so this next statement on the paper. In nothing is not the potential for anything. If we ever had nothing, and there's nothing. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine nothing because we're something, all right? And whenever you try to put a framework around nothing to understand it, well, I have a framework, and so it's not nothing, all right? So it's a pretty difficult concept. But if there was ever a time in history where we actually had nothing, if you went all the way back and at some point, boop, before that there was nothing, well then we would have never gotten here where we have something, because something doesn't come from nothing. It's basically the argument here. And so, in nothing is not the potential for anything. What we believe is that something that does not have the limitations and characteristics of matter, spirit, God, existed for eternity, and that God created matter, that He caused it to come into existence. Other views on this one, well, that matter has always existed. Problems with that, and we'll talk about them later. It's a little confusing to try to get into that this early in the course. And then the other one is, well, did it just pop into existence for no reason out of nothing? I used to call that absurd, but I've been actually seeing some people out there in the scientific community suggesting possibly that's what they believe happened. So, but in nothing is not the potential for anything. Standards of proof. Well, you can't prove there's a God, people will say. Well, my first question to that person is, well, what do you mean by proof? Do you mean like in a court of law where we're fighting for our lives here, and you have to prove that guilt beyond any reasonable doubt? In other words, you'd have to be a little off kilter to not accept it. I agree with you. God did that on purpose. We talked about that earlier with 1 Corinthians 1:21, that this idea of being able to just prove so that you'd have to be insane not to believe in God is not part of the way God created things. He made it so that when He drew back from us, that we would have to come to Him based on faith. All right, and so it leaves us with free will. this idea of standards of proof. Second standard of proof, preponderance of evidence. Okay, you go to civil court, a little different. We're just fighting over money here. And in a civil court, all you have to do is bring a preponderance of evidence that most of the evidence shows that what you're saying is true. Then that's what's true. Does Christianity measure up there? I think there's a lot of evidence for God. Is there a preponderance where we have more evidence that he does exist than other people have that he doesn't exist? I would say that at least potentially that's so. Whether or not that's so in every moment in history, I can't really answer that for you. But yes, I believe there's a good deal of evidence in nature and in ourselves for the existence of God, and that's something that we'll talk more about again deeper into the course. This is introduction. But then reasonability, next level of proof. Okay, is it reasonable? Is it worth pursuing further? This idea of belief in God. And I would say absolutely. Reasonability passes that test with flying colors. All right, so standards of proof. The basic revelation, the sneaking suspicion. All right, let's talk about this for a minute and how that impacts your presuppositions, which is where we're going next. Okay, I believe that God revealed himself in three ways. And that was to draw us from an internal revelation that you really can't prove to anybody except you accept it yourself. That I've got the sneaking suspicion that I think is pretty universal. Everybody seems to have it. That there is something greater than me that explains my existence, and it's worth trying to find that. Whether it's the Christian on his knees praying to Jesus, or whether it's the absolute atheist looking at the cosmos and saying, you created me, nonetheless, there is this sneaking suspicion that there's something bigger than ourselves, better than ourselves out there. And so we want to go look for it. Second level of revelation is this whole idea of nature and how in nature we see evidence for the existence of God. Third is that seeking beyond nature, there is a special revelation, the Bible and the person of Jesus Christ. The world has the experience of having had Jesus, God in the flesh, living in the midst of it, and so there's this revelation, special revelation about the character and the person of God that has been given to us. So how does that impact our presuppositions? Well, what you do with that basic revelation, do you renounce it? Say, well, I'm just going to stop thinking that way because you were born with it. Anyways, all children ask why, and there's reasons why that would be an indication that there's something inside of them that's looking for something greater than themselves. But nonetheless, this impact on presuppositions that if I say, well, okay, well, with regard to origins, I am not going to talk with anybody about anything unless it's naturalistic. Well, okay, by presupposing that all truth is found in matter, and so therefore I only have to consider naturalistic causes for things, I preclude. I push outside of the realm of thinking anything that would lead me to any other conclusion other than that my material idea about the universe is correct. So let's move up to presuppositions. And how are we doing for time? We're doing good. About 2 minutes to do this. Presuppositions, things that we suppose ahead of time. As we begin our thinking, we begin somewhere, and we usually begin at this level of presupposition, things that we're going to say, okay, I agree certain things are true. All right, and the impact of desired outcomes on what I'm going to be willing to believe is true. If I don't want a universe with a God in it that tells me what to do, I will be tempted to presuppose things that keep me from ever finding God. All right, Jesus Christ, he's the central presupposition of the biblical Christian worldview. Every question on that thing, theology and all those different 10 questions, all right, Jesus is in the middle of the answer to all of them. All right, general knowledge, what was taught in class about presuppositions, I would just say listen to this, and the whole idea about revealed truth and imagination, and with this is where we'll conclude this, is this thing where, okay, I cannot think my way all the way back to the beginning of what it takes to believe what I believe. Whether it's atheism or Christianity or whatever it is, eventually I get to this place where my thoughts only reach so far. So I get to the place where I can't prove the next step. All right, and so I go back into a very basic level of presuppositions where I have to trust one of two things. Revelation, the idea that something greater than me exists that's revealing things, or my own imagination. I have to think this up for myself. So those two things. And with that, we're done with review. God bless you. Prepare for the test. And again, if you don't know what you're doing, get on the phone. I'll help you, okay? Bless you. Bye-bye.